Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. This time, we are discussing the Surreal in our Augustine Allusions. We are going to be jumping right into that here in a moment, but first, we need to get our announcements and such out of the way, as well as our shout-out. So, to begin, I'll start us off, and then everybody else can think about what they want to say. I'm Adam L. Spain with the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and we are currently trying to get to $100 per month of support, and that can be done through Patreon, Subscribestar, Locals, or Direct Contact. You can find all of those buttons and so much more at the Inn of Planar Crossroads at innofplanarcrossroads.com or TheIoPC.com. Both of those should work. If they don't, let me know, because they're supposed to. I'm trying to get those worked out to where it's got a better graphics and stuff on it. But for right now, it's got a landing page. That's a good thing. So that's what we're hoping to keep going. The only other announcement is that we're going to try and start by now. This is August. So we should have live streaming started to where not only are you going to be able to sit down, we'll probably do chats and stuff like that while I'm painting. I like to work through and talk through my process of creation while I'm doing it. And so whether I'm painting or drawing or working on a piece of writing or something like that, something creative will be happening during those house specials streams. And as it does, you guys will get to see it created and my thought processes, and even buy some of the art pieces that will be made there. So that's pretty cool, I think, being able to not only see something created, but then be able to show someone, if you buy it, hey, this is how it was made. Look at this. And, it's neat stuff. So that's what I've got. Let's see. We will go Skrat, JP, and then Dan. What you got?
All right, I'm Skrat from A Squirrel Plays over on YouTube, where I like to talk about world building, character creations, and storytelling, and all that good stuff, whether it's TTRPGs, video games, or movies, or something else. And what I'd like to do a bit more of in the future is get into more TTRPG reviews, where I get my hands on some of the lesser known ones, some smaller ones, and hopefully shine a little bit of light on them. Not that I have a lot of sway in that matter, but I'll do what I can. I do have one in the pipeline coming up, hopefully semi-soon, or hopefully it'll be out by the time you're watching this. So that will be neat. And that's about it. I'm going to go update my avatar to match the topic of the day.
All
right. Well, I'm JP from Seven Sphere, making of Open Legend, and that's about all I need to say, right?
Oh, no.
Okay, so this is the third chat. He's done 4 mic drops now. I'm not sure if he's got a 5th mic drop in the hat for, when we're finished with this last bit of discussion. So, we'll have to see.
It must be wacky, because I'm not finding the mathematical formula for how they're expanding. I love it.
Oh, trying to do math in a Looney Tunes universe would be terrible.
Oh, gee whiz.
That's horror right there. That's not wacky. All right, Dan, what you got?
Hey, everybody. I'm Dan from Avenue Studios. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, and anywhere you find podcasts. And big thing we do is Wednesdays live. We do live plays on Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern. And then we are going to have an additional new live show doing the Force Forge and the live play for our theme collaborations with the Interplanar Crossroads, where we take ideas from the concepts we talk about here and Around the Hearth and incorporate them into a one-shot that we play in Foundry Virtual Tabletop. So hopefully we'll have figured that out by the time you're watching this, because we're going to be doing it. So, but anyways, I'm very much looking forward to that, and it's been a lot of fun so far. Of course, the modules we make, they are available to our patrons, and Jacob can also be contacted for them. So we've had a lot of fun so far. I'm really looking forward to this one, because of course, Adam from the Interplay or Crossroads will be the game master for Augustine Allusions. So do check that out when it comes out.
There you go. We'll see how it goes. I am going to put a poll out to see what type of game y'all want to run. So
Awesome.
that poll will already have been live by the time this one comes out. But I'll put a poll out and see whether people want to have a wacky, a weird, or a surreal game. So there you go.
Very cool. That's going to be fun.
It'll be something. Depends on what they select. It would depend on how heavy it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's everything we've got for now as far as announcements, which means we are to Levi's spotlight. Even though Levi's not here, we're carrying on his tradition, or his namesake, I should say. So
he's fine. He's just not here.
Yeah. So here we go. Dragna Carta is our shout out this time. And I watched a few of theirs, as you could see here. And their roll or no roll, I agree with a lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And that's part of the beauty of this. You can agree with some, but not all of the things that you find on the internet. But I like this one, Dragna Carta, right there. He currently has 934, so maybe if we got him to 1,000, that would be good. Tell him the Inn of Planar Crossroads sent you. That would be cool. All right. So that's him. Okay. That is what we've got for now, I guess. With announcements and shout-out done, that means it's time to grab your preferred beverage. Join us by the Hearth and participate in the discussion in the comments. Or the Surreal. So, I'm going to give you guys some stuff for this one. This, as I said before, this is kind of my jam. I like surreal things. I like surreal things that still make some sense. So we're going to kind of touch in that a little bit. But some things you can look at as far as ideas for surreal things. There's Twin Peaks is an obvious example. David Lynch and the things he directs and writes and stuff like that. Very much surreal. And Twin Peaks definitely kind of hits a perfect balance in a lot of its episodes, not in all of them, but in a lot of its episodes. Hits a perfect a balance of things being just familiar enough and just strange enough and weird enough to really hit that surreal spot in the brain, to hit that uncanny valley of reality. So there's Twin Peaks. There's The Fountain is actually a movie that I saw one time. It has Hugh Jackman in it, and who was it? The lady that played Evelyn in the Mummy movies. It's her as the main lady, but it's him and her, and there's this time element, and it gets all... There you go. It gets all kind of mixed up, and you do have to kind of pay attention to follow it. And it's got ideas of reincarnation and passage through time, discovery of the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life, and then how that feeds into this cycle of them being connected through eternity type of thing. So it has that really surreal thing going on, if you want to check that one out.
That's The Fountain, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that one.
Because even just the imagery from it is very surreal. He literally is in, like, he's immortal in some way, I believe it how it is, and he goes through that type of discovery of, even if he's not immortal, he reincarnates and knows who he is type of thing, or discovers who he is each time type of thing. So that's pretty neat. That's a way to really get a lot of imagery as an inspiration.
So, would Robin Williams one that he did?
That's on my list.
Okay, yeah. Is it on your list? I was wondering if that's more surreal or if that's actually a little bit more dreamscape.
Well, when we get to Dreamscapes, so spoilers for Dreamscapes, we'll discuss how they can be wacky, weird, or surreal. They can have all of
Fair
those
enough.
elements. So that's why we're saving it for last. But What Dreams May Come is on my list for Surreal. It is so beautiful.
Oh, it is.
It's a beautiful movie. It's not theologically correct, but it's a beautiful movie. It's really wonderful to kind of look at and get the perspectives on how this is effective and what each person's heaven is different because each person is different type of thing, and his is the things that they share. Oh, it's really good. And then The Life of Pi, I would actually consider a surreal one. Not not the lead up with the journalist and stuff, right? But the story that Pi tells.
But it's all real.
It's all real, but it's also all allegorical. Is kind of part of the idea. The things he's talking about happened, but they didn't happen exactly as this person telling the story is telling the story type of thing. And it really is. It's good for a lot of. If you want to, oddly enough, if you want a more grounded surrealness to something, that's when you can look at too, because it's a very personal story, and you could put your players through something similar, make it a personal story with that. And then there's The City of Lost Children, French film I think that's also by Guillermo del Toro, if I remember correctly.
I think I've seen that.
The City of Lost Children. It has Ron Perlman in it. And it's about a man who is stealing the dreams of children because he himself cannot sleep and dream. And so or something like that, I think is what it is. But that one works. And then there is the lighthearted side of surrealness with something like Willy Wonka, because that feels more surreal than it does wacky to me, because some of those laws, there's still laws of the universe that seem to be happening, but a lot of it also seems to kind of bend and shift, more like a funhouse mirror than actually breaking the laws of physics like a wacky one would, like the floating Fizbees drink or whatever it was. There's this idea that Wonka is somehow magical himself. He himself brings some kind of magical nature to it through his whimsy and through not necessarily wackiness, but like a more cultivated type of silliness, a childlike perspective on things. Because children often have a very surreal view of the world around them. So there's another inspiration point. Have some kids and find out.
Is this one on your list, Donnie Darko?
It is not. I wanted to leave some things for other people to say. So that was not on my list, but I know what you're speaking of. So there you go.
Yeah, I kept seeing that one when I was looking stuff up, figure out what falls under surreal. That one was a common one.
Well, some might say that a squirrel riding a motorcycle with huge shades is a pretty surreal thing, but
Yeah. That was, before we did this, I was looking things up, trying to figure out something to contribute, and what I found out is lots of people on the internet can't seem to agree on what surreal actually means.
that's fairly true.
Shocker.
I noticed a big chunk, people confused it with a certain type of horror. They would like psychological horror and stuff, I guess, or something, but I didn't feel like that qualified. Didn't seem right.
I think it falls into that same type of category as squares and rectangles. All squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So all psychological horror is surreal, but not all surreal is psychological horror, is kind of how I would go with that one. Because surreal is way larger than just horror. Because something like Oz, the various stories in Oz some of them can be termed as just wacky, and then some of them can be termed as kind of surreal. And I wanted to mention
Howl's
that.
Moving Castle.
Howl's Moving Castle. You know, there are surreal elements in it, definitely.
Right.
Because she goes back in time, and there's very much a mind palace aspect to the way Howl and Calcifer make places appear and happen. So I can see how that would work. I'd probably term it more weird than I would surreal, simply because there's laws to it.
Where would you put Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
I probably put that surreal. I haven't even watched that show. I've seen clips, and I'm like, that's crazy.
It's just bad country.
So that's what I would say on those.
I mean, we should find somebody who's like somebody who studied film and stuff who could give us their opinions on surreal movies, right?
Yeah.
If only we knew somebody like that.
I don't know anybody like that. I looked at the surreal stuff and I was like,
Not your cup of tea.
one guy made this thing where this eyeball, it was just this eyeball and it was changing lights and colors. It was a cool image. Everybody found way more meaning in it than I did.
Yeah. So funnily enough, like I said, I was online looking like, all right, what falls under surreal? Apparently, according to the wisdom of the internet, Yoshi's Island and Mystical Ninja both fall under surreal. I don't know how.
That doesn't work. Like those are weird and maybe even wacky, but they're not surreal.
Oh, I don't know how they got that idea.
It's Yoshi's Island. Like it's a video game.
Yeah, right?
Well, have you played Mystical Ninja on Nintendo 64?
I've seen play of it. I should put it that way.
An argument could be made for that one. It was strange, but one though that I feel like actually could fit into it. Much more recent one is Hellblade, Swanya's Sacrifice. I forget how you pronounce her name.
Oh,
have you seen that one?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was one they were trying to get schizophrenia, I think, across. They're real big on the motion capture thing they were doing, but the whole time you're playing, you're hearing the voices in your head and you're seeing things that aren't actually there, but you're actually in a real world.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little
I do see
mythological kind of world, but
yeah. Well, she's going to deal with the death of her. I'm not sure if it's husband or just mate. I'm not sure how that was.
I think that was their version of husband because it was like old Viking. What is based off,
this came out for
It's Norse
major
mythology.
platforms. Like PS5 and stuff, right? I think I saw.
Well, it came out before PS5.
Oh, PS4.
It may have since then come out for it, but
I don't know. I don't keep up with those consoles. I'm like, I PC game, and that's what I do. So,
Oh, the real systems.
the PC master race,
The
Master Race.
Yeah.
That one is cool. You're so right on that though. It had some cool imagery in it. I really like that.
And I feel like that would hit the surreal category a little bit more than Yoshi's Island, at least.
Yeah, definitely. And you can take, so the reason we've been mentioning these things is because of them surreal, like if something's weird. If something's wacky. It's kind of like it when you see it. I don't know what art is, but I know it when I see it type of thing. Mm-hmm. But with the surreal, it's almost like you're looking for something you don't know exactly when you see it. It can sometimes it can creep up on you, or sometimes once you've trained yourself to look for it, you're like, I see. There's a lot of metaphor and simile and allusion in your surrealness. Going back to some of our examples, Cessna's journey, I believe is what was referenced. She sees those things, but they're representations of what she's going through. In in Twin Peaks, you see things, but they're like dreams or odd manifestations and mannerisms that are just off enough. To shout out something with Compass and the movie night that they did. Puzzle... What was it? Puzzle Agent.
Oh my gosh. Puzzle Agent.
Puzzle Agent, the first one, is very surreal. Very Twin Peaks. Like, they go into a factory, but the factory's not a factory type of thing. It's not what it is. And everybody in the town, this is normal. And, oh, I forgot to mention it in Weird. Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls is a great kids show about the weird. And there are surreal elements, but it really does fall into the weird more than the surreal. But
so I guess the important question is, how do you incorporate this into your games?
Well, I've incorporated it before. I've done like a dreamscape type of situation, which I am going to hold the main explanation for our dreamscape discussion. But the idea was there was this town that the players bumped into, and they could not escape until they dealt with the thing that was making everything so surreal. And so that's a way you can do it. It's kind of like our example from the Wacky with the Feywild coming in at a certain time or something. But the surreal, I think Wacky and surreal are things that need sprinkled in. The weird can have a whole thing based around it, but the surreal can get kind of a lot.
Well, so the reason that I'm curious is because, like, all those movie examples, I can understand how they're surreal, but I don't quite see immediately how to put that into my game. So I'm curious what surreal elements were in your game.
Okay. Well, I guess I better do it here then, so we can get a better handle
Well, I
on
mean,
it.
you don't have to go into the whole thing of how it worked, but just like give me like what was a surreal thing that you sprinkled?
So,
Like just a simple example.
they come into a town and it's deserted. Right, you're already offset by a ghost town because a town implies something living there. If nothing is living there, then you already have a weird element at least. Then they try to leave the town, and as they leave the town, they find that they've found the town again. And if they look back, they still see the town, and they see themselves at the other end of the town, coming into town. And so you have this this very small world. That's an element you can bring in. And it's, how is that happening? How are we seeing ourselves? What is going on here?
So you did this a little bit in that game, that one shot that that Dan and I played in with you.
Right, there was a...
Where we were the hunters.
Yeah, there was a weird element to that. I didn't go full surreal on you guys, because that would have been too much for a
you alluded to
one-shot.
surreal stuff with the moon and stuff like that, but we didn't get to see that part.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think my character's vision might have fallen into the surreal. Because I'm wondering, too, because I think I know where I've used surreal in my games, but thinking, going off of what Skrat was talking about in the internet, too, giving a solid definition to what we're talking about, too? Because we said with Wacky, it's breaking all the rules, and stuff doesn't always make sense. Weird has these rules, they're different than what the characters and usually the players are used to. There's normal, and then there's these new set of rules that are different. And usually, it, like Adam, you were saying a lot, that it when it's weird, it is actually happening. It's weird, but it is actually happening, whereas surreal is not necessarily what you are witnessing is actually what is happening. Something might be happening, but it's somehow being interpreted either through your senses or the way it's being delivered. Does that seem right? You guys can push back on me on it, or to grasp a full
perhaps
as best we can.
perhaps it would be clearer to say, in a Wacky game, weird thing, like crazy things are happening, but the consequences aren't there. People are understanding, like, they know these wacky things are happening, and everybody's treating it like normal. In weird, these weird things are happening and everybody knows it's weird. In the surreal, you don't know.
Yes, that's good.
In the surreal, you don't know.
Yep. Yes, which leans into why horror could be a thing, because when you don't know, that can be some of the scariest moments.
It goes back to that Lovecraft quote. The oldest and deepest fear, I'm paraphrasing, the oldest and deepest fear of man is fear of the unknown. That's what makes so many people scared of Lovecraft stuff. I'm not scared of it. I think it's cool, but other people are scared of it.
I definitely think that I've used Surreal for the deities in my games a lot and how they interact with the characters and stuff. Certainly in Bomb Squad, because I'm describing these things like I have one deity, the All-Mother, and depending on when you look at her, she looks different. She might look animal-esque or something. You're not sure, are you actually seeing her? Are you just, but these are ways for her to express herself to the characters, or when someone has a vision of the future. I use that a lot. Prophecy.
Also, the mind dredges into Brick's memories.
Yeah.
The mental bridge.
That bridge. Yeah, that's very surreal because not actually a bridge, but it's representing. It goes into that a lot of analogous, creative ways to describe something. Like for the bridge, for those who don't know, is this character has amnesia and he's trying to remember it, and we're using this representation of him putting pieces of a broken bridge back together to build this path back to memory. So each time he puts a piece in, he gets a memory back. So yeah, that's how I've used it in games.
Basically, surreal is kind of using your artistic, creative thing to describe something without describing something.
Yeah. Metaphor, allegory, all that type of stuff. Metaphor, allegory, and simile are your best friends when trying to deal with the surreal.
Skrat, have you played with anything like from a writing aspect with that at all, or seen anything that's intrigued you?
So I have seen lots of new writers attempt to do that, and it does not go well. It is a very hard thing to do well. If you are working on a visual medium or working with a visual medium such as a game or a movie, infinitely easier to do. But like that's just pros and cons of which platform you choose. Whereas all you have is words, it can get very muddy very quick. Matter of fact, when I was
really interesting
looking through the interwebs for like what is surreal, I got this painting, the one with all the staircases. I was like, okay, I know that one.
MC
Melting clocks and
So and then I got this snippet from something. What is this from? Something I can't even pronounce, and I have no idea what it's saying. It to me, it just looks like garbage. But they're like, nope, that's surreal literature, and I'm like, well, it's not readable, so call it what you want.
Literature that is illegible might not be literature.
Yeah. So, well, go ahead.
No, I get where you're coming from. And I really do agree. I was going to say that weird and wacky... Weird is easy because you know what normal is, so you just twist it a little bit, and it makes it weird. Wacky's even kind of easy because we all like to laugh. We can all tell jokes. But because the surreal is the uncanny valley, the surreal is going to places where you don't understand, it is a lot harder. It's one of the reasons why... I told y'all in the chat, in our little collaboration chat, that I was listening through the Alice in Wonderland and then the Alice Through the Looking Glass books on audiobook to prepare my mind. And I'm like, yeah, this Alice in Wonderland, it's not exactly like the movie, the Disney movie, but it's pretty close. There's a lot of same things going on. And I actually like both for different reasons. They're not, it's not nearly a direct translation or anything, but it's wacky and kind of fun, even though it happens in a dream, which you would think would be surreal. It doesn't really come off surreal to me. It comes out cute and silly and fun and what we were calling earlier wacky. But Alice Through the Looking Glass has moments in it where you're like, that's surreal. Alice, in one of the times, and this is how you can tell something is surreal versus something is just weird and wacky, is the way it's presented and the tone for it. Alice is talking to the White Queen, and the White Queen is saying all these things, and then as she's putting on her shawl, and as she does, she becomes a sheep. But it's this, in the way it's described, it's like something happens to her slowly, and then she gets into a boat with Alice. Where was the boat before this? And all of these things start to come into your mind, and you're like, where am I? And if you can get yourself saying, where am I? In a game? In a TTRPG situation? Where am I in my mind? You're getting pretty close. She goes down this, and eventually she comes down and they stop in this boat. And through some way or form, the sheep gets out and she goes into a store. But the store, where'd the store come from? But she goes into the store, and Alice goes with her into the store. And she says, you have to buy something. And so she has to buy the egg, because Alice is trying to become a queen, and she's trying to go through these different things to become a queen instead of a pawn. Yeah, that's a very surreal type of allegory for growing up from a pawn to the queen. Alice is trying to grow up. And so you have this allegorical metaphor, which wasn't present in Wonderland. Wonderland was whimsy. Wonderland was wacky. This is very allegorical. Things are happening inside this girl's mind as she's in this looking glass world. And so she goes to buy an egg. And as she does, she goes to buy this egg, and the sheep says, I can't put it in your hand. I never put anything in anyone's hand. Terribly rude. And so she takes it to the end of the counter in this darker part of this shop and comes back, and Alice is like, okay, I'll go get it. And as Alice walks, things change. Is she in a store? It's so dark here, she can't tell. She's having to feel her way through until she feels her way through, and then there's grass, and then there's rocks and wood? That's a branch. That's not the back of a chair. And she continues to walk, and as she's walking, instead of the egg getting smaller, it gets bigger. Instead of the egg getting normally larger to accommodate for her coming, it gets larger and larger and larger until it's Humpty Dumpty sitting on a wall who she was going to see. This egg that she bought became that. And so, in me just describing that, you see surreal literature done well. And that's the way you use it in your stories and in your games.
I agree.
See, sometimes they're silent because they can't think of anything to say. Sometimes I just leave them speechless.
Speaking of liking to be wacky, hey Dan, what's the strangest breakfast?
Oh no.
Surreal.
There we go. That's his mandatory dad joke for our conversation night.
There you go, that can be a comment.
Is there a rim shot?
There's a rim shot here.
There we go. We need to use those more often when we make our dad jokes.
That was good. I love it.
But that's how...
The cringier, the better it is.
Yeah. So that's how you would use surreal for, especially like a dreamscape type of thing, which we're going to get into next time. That whole change and how things that don't lead into each other logically do end up leading into each other in this moment. That's a way you can do it.
I picked on the newer, younger writers being very bad at surreal, but I have noticed some people really got a knack for it too. Like there's
oh well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, yes.
I was gonna say, I bet he's one that leans that way. But in this writers group that I go to, there's a really young guy in there, and I mean he's still living at home, and English is his second language, so his writing is technically awful in that sense. But like, he still makes a slew of just basic writing mistakes, but he loves that surreal stuff, and you can tell he's really, really good at it too, just with like minimal exposure or experience actually writing. But like I said, all that basic writings, I mean, just simple stuff like, okay, terrible dialogue tags, repetitive use of these words, and part of that's second language, but yeah, while I'm sitting there reading, it's like, no, I can vision this perfectly, like what you're trying to say. But I don't have that. I am very bad at surreal, trying to write that kind of stuff. So he makes me a little jealous, but that's all right.
Well, like I said, it is probably harder than any of the other ones we've talked about to do right. And even you alluding to that, it is harder to do it right. But if you pull it off, your players won't forget.
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm not going to say I think it is, I'm just going to say I wonder is it one of those, it's the hot sauce kind of thing? Like less is more, you just want a little drip in there to get the heat across? Or it seems like it could be too easy to lean too hard into, and then that's when things just get confusing and muddled. But if you can just get that little drop of heat in there.
And that goes back to my experience in film school too. Of course, with all these college students, it was always just way too much.
Yeah,
surreal for the sake of surrealness,
right?
And so it's like, what are you even trying to say? You're just being artsy. Like it's not,
Yeah,
that's kind of what it was.
Just trying to make it pretty.
Yeah, maybe that's, and this, I don't know. We're probably getting close to final thoughts. This could be mine, unless you tell us, Adam. Is the use of surreal, like Adam had said, with metaphor and allegory, it needs to have a purpose behind it. I think it's a tool to be used. Don't just do surreal for surreal's sake. Even if the purpose is to terrify in Cthulhu stuff, and but it should have a goal. There's something you're reaching for, and you're painting. To me, I imagine it as painting with words when I'm game master, because I'm having to verbally express it. But you're trying to paint this picture that grasps a concept that might actually be a little difficult to kind of dialogue out, and you're trying to do it in a way where you can kind of grasp it and kind of see it almost through glass or something like that. But if it doesn't have a purpose behind it, and it's just surreal for surreal's sake, then you're just an eyeball going in and out of focus with weird colors, and I don't know. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think a point to go into before we'll go into final thoughts after this. A point to go into about when you're doing your surreal stuff, as someone who likes it and has done it before with, I assume, success. The players liked it. If you do it, don't assume it's like doing a mystery. Don't assume they understand the message. Don't expect them to. It's okay if they don't.
Never expect players to get it.
So don't expect them, just like in a mystery game, you can't expect them to get all the clues, because you're the person who wrote it. You know what all the clues are. In a surreal thing, you don't have to get them to understand, right? That's not the point. That's not the point of the surreal. The surreal is that they don't understand, and how are they dealing with their lack of that understanding. For them, that's the point of the game portion of it. So, them dealing with what they don't or can't understand. The metaphor may be there, And looking back after the campaign goes on, if you've woven some kind of clue in about the big bad into that surreal thing that happened, then they get it. That's the realization point that you want them to have, not in the moment. You want them to have it later, and then they're like, wow, did you really plan that out? And you can actually say, why, yes, I did. I didn't know if you were going to get it or not, but I did. So there you go. That's a point about it, is don't expect them to understand the metaphor. All right, so final thoughts we need to get into, as has been alluded to. We'll have to stop discussing the surreal, which is my thing. But let's see. This time, let's do Dan, Skrat, and then JP.
All right. I think I'll just... You know what I'll do is kind of what I was starting to say with it's a tool to be used, like Skrat was saying, the hot sauce. I think that's a great metaphor for it too. Some people might like a little bit more, a little less, so definitely always kind of get the vibe from your table, talk about it. But it can be a wonderful tool to capture stuff and even hint at things, like Adam's saying, hint at things you want to have later to come out potentially. And they can be vague enough, if you do it right, they can be vague enough where however the story kind of unfolds with your game, because you never know what's going to happen precisely, it could allude back to that. And as the story progresses, you and your group of players could develop a metaphor from it. If you do it right, it's a little tricky thing, but I've loved using it, like I said, for deities and for prophecy, where it's just vague enough and kind of blurry enough that we could solidify it into something else as the story goes on, depending on how things go. So I think it's just a really great tool to use. And it doesn't have to be horror, like we said, too. There's such a wide berth of use for this story element. Tag, you're it.
What you got, Skrat?
Well, trying to figure out how to word this. So we talked about not leaning into it too much, but also I think another thing is to know your own limit, like your own skill limit. So, like, I'm not very good at it. I've already said that. The keeper of the interplanar Crossroads here, he's probably really good at it. But like this last story I wrote, there's a couple, I guess you could say, surreal scenes in there, but I had to keep them short. One, because it was important to the story, but having a huge surreal scene was not critical to the story, but also because I know I'm not very good at that kind of thing, so I have to give it just a dash to get the point across. And I would think likewise, if you realize you're not very good at it, you might want to limit it at your table in your game. So know what you're capable of, and also we already talked about it too. The players may not always pick up what you're putting down. So don't be too vague or just surreal for surreal's sake, as it was also mentioned. I'm just echoing people at this point.
Oh, that's good.
All I got though.
All right.
I think I've got two kind of things here. One, I think a good point to keep in mind is once you've presented the surreal, this goes a little bit into what Adam was saying, is that once you've presented the information and provided the information, stop talking. Because if you keep going, you can undo it, right? Mm-hmm. So don't try and over it. The other is, to get a well-written surreal piece, how many authors does it take? Fish.
Good point. Probably the best point. I think that's actually the comment of this particular video. How many authors does it take? Fish. There you go.
I'm not kidding. That sounds like the snippet. I got it here if y'all want it.
You could say it. I can tell you if I can interpret, but I don't know.
You want me to read it real quick?
Sure.
Okay. It was the end of sorrow lies. The rail stations were dead, flowing like bees stung from honeysuckle. The people hung back and watched the ocean. Animals flew in and out of focus. The time had come, yet king dogs never grow old. They stay young and fit, and someday they might come to the beach and have a few drinks, a few laughs, and get on with it. But not now. The time had come, we all knew it, but who would go first?
The dogs will go first.
I mean, if you say so, I'll take your word for it.
I spend a lot of time in my head, so.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's a bit much on the surrealness for me too.
Yeah, but
I do think the
if
dogs
they were
will go
even
first.
making a point, it could have been one sentence, I'm sure.
Was that in context for a larger thing, or is it just by itself?
I'm assuming it's larger, but it's just
Yeah.
a snippet. When I was looking for surreal stuff, they're like, here's a famous example from
Famous.
something. Yeah.
I mean, I got
Maybe
the
it's
picture
famous
that was
for
being
bad.
painted, but I'm not sure. I still think the dogs would go first because they don't die. The dog kings don't die, so they go first.
Comment below who you think.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. I guess
That's
it's to
good.
me now. As far as the surreal, my final thought is don't be afraid to use your own dreams as inspiration. Because in the palaces of our mind where we find ourselves often, sometimes each night, we have adventures we know not of because we wake. But we can take our waking dreams and bring them with us to the palaces of our mind and thus share them with our friends. So that's mine. Use your own dreams. And now I have to go write that. I have to remember to write that down in my journal book thing, because I just came up with that off the top of my head. So, anyway, take your friends to your dream palace sometime so they can have some weird fun stuff go on in your adventures. As always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
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 This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
There we go, gents.
Beautiful. That's
Oh,
what we do
there we
all
go.
the time. Wow, unicorns.
Rainbow unicorns. Well, are those are unicorns, and as they run, they leave a rainbow behind? They're like Rainbow Dash?
Maybe. It was a really interesting poster.
Yeah, it looks more like they're farting rainbows, to be honest.
Barton rainbows.
There's the whole poster.
Oh my word.